Dark clouds gathered over the rugged plains of the Arizona Territory, casting long shadows across a solitary ranch. A lone horseman, broad-shouldered and stern-eyed, reined his steed to a halt at the rickety fence. He never expected his life would be changed by a desperate widow and her 2 frightened children. Nor could he know that behind her soft-spoken pleas for help lay a secret that might reshape both their fates forever. Outlaws prowled the land like wolves drawn by whispers of hidden wealth, and he would soon find himself in a perilous stand between ruthless bandits and a fortune beyond imagining. Cicadas hummed as the summer sun climbed higher over Painted Rock Ranch. Everett Boone wiped sweat from his brow, surveying the dry gulch that split his land. His horse, a muscular buckskin named Buckshot, pawed the earth, eager to move. Miles away, the sounds of rowdy activity from the tiny frontier town of Sweetwater drifted through the still air. Everett had business in Sweetwater. He was short on supplies, and the area's water well had gone bone dry from the ongoing drought. He also intended to inquire about the rumored bandit raids. As an honest rancher, Everett was determined to keep his property safe from the same outlaws that prowled the territory. Pausing, Everett remembered the night he decided to settle here. After drifting from job to job, herding cattle from Texas to Kansas, breaking broncs in New Mexico, he stumbled on this little stretch of land in Arizona. It wasn't the prettiest, but it was cheap, and it spoke to him. Something about the jagged rocks and scraggly mesquite trees reminded him that beauty could be found in unpolished places. So he sank his last savings into building a modest homestead and spent day after day coaxing crops to grow in the clay-like soil, feeling every sunrise and sunset fill his veins with a renewed sense of purpose. If only the West weren't so wild. The rumor mill had been churning outlaws, had been seen ransacking homesteads near the border, terrorizing travelers and burning barns. Whispers claimed these bandits were after an unspeakable treasure, a lost fortune from the days when prospectors combed the desert for silver and gold. Everett had brushed off the tales, but a gnawing sense told him he should remain vigilant. Life on the frontier had taught him to be prepared for anything. With a sigh, Everett mounted up and nudged Buckshot forward. The late morning heat baked the earth beneath them, curling the edges of the sparse grasses. A few hours of riding brought the rancher within sight of Sweetwater's main street. It was little more than a dusty road, flanked by a handful of buildings, a general store, a saloon called the Lonesome Spur, a blacksmith's shop, a dingy boarding house, and the sheriff's office. Despite the outward simplicity, Sweetwater bustled with life. Cowboys drifted in from distant ranches. Gamblers passed through seeking fortune, and occasional travelers headed to bigger towns like Tombstone or Tucson. Everett dismounted in front of the general store. Its porch offered momentary shade from the blistering sun. He'd barely hitched Buckshot when he spotted a small figure tugging at his pant leg. A boy no older than 8 looked up at him. His eyes were wide and dust streaked his face. "Mister," the boy said, voice trembling, "please can you help my ma?" Everett crouched, placing a steady hand on the child's shoulder. "What's the matter, son?" he asked gently. The boy's name, as he soon learned, was Thomas Carter. Thomas, tears welling in his eyes, explained that a group of men had chased his mother and sister. They were hiding in the alley by the blacksmith's shop, pinned behind crates. "Stay close," Everett said softly, setting aside the thought of purchasing supplies. With Thomas in tow, Everett hurried across the street toward the blacksmith's. He found a battered young woman, trembling, her dark hair matted with sweat. Her daughter, who looked around, 10, clung to her skirts, eyes darting nervously. The woman's lips were cracked from thirst, and her dress was torn. A bruise colored her cheek, an ugly purplish hue. "They took our wagon," she managed, in a ragged whisper. "We have nothing." Thomas ran to his mother, burying his face against her. The girl Abigail blinked back tears. Everett's heart twisted at the sight. He felt a surge of protectiveness. No woman and her children should be cornered by outlaws in broad daylight. Just then a pair of coarse-looking men rounded the corner, reeking of whiskey and arrogance. One wore a ragged leather vest and sporting a scruffy beard. The other had a cruel gleam in his eyes. They sized up Everett with the brazen confidence of men who thought themselves above the law. "Back away, friend," snarled the bearded man. "This here is none of your business. The lady owes us a debt." Everett's jaw tightened. "The only thing I see is you harassing a mother and her children," he said coolly. "I'll have to ask you to leave." A flicker of hesitation crossed the men's faces. Everett Boone was no stranger to confrontation. His wide shoulders and steady gaze had dissuaded many troublemakers. Undeterred, the second man grinned, his hand drifting to his gun belt. "Best mind your tongue, rancher," he warned. "We're under the employ of Duke Slade, and he don't take kindly to meddling." Evoking Duke Slade's name sent a shudder through bystanders, who watched from behind barrels and corners. Slade was a notorious figure whispered to command an outlaw band spanning half the territory. If these two were part of Slade's gang, they might be more dangerous than your average drunken cowpoke. But Everett had never been one to back down from a righteous cause. In one swift move, Everett stepped forward, gripping the leather-vested man's wrist before he could fully draw his revolver. He twisted sharply, forcing the gun to clatter to the ground, then delivered a firm right hook that knocked the man back onto the dusty street. The second outlaw hesitated, uncertain. Everett lowered his voice. "You want to reach for that gun? Because I promise you won't like what happens next." The man's eyes flickered from the rancher's calloused fists to the woman behind him. Clearly outmatched, the outlaw spat on the ground. "We ain't done," he muttered. Then, gathering his partner, they stalked away, hurling threats and curses under their breath. Onlookers gradually resumed their business, though a tense hush lingered. Everyone knew that trouble had just reared its head. Everett turned to the woman. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. She swallowed hard, nodding though tears welled up. "Yes," she replied softly. "Thank you." Her voice carried a refined cadence that hinted at an upbringing quite different from the typical frontier woman. Her name was Clementine Carter. Everett offered Clementine a canteen of water from his saddlebag, which she accepted gratefully. As the children sipped, Everett asked how they'd come to be in such dire straits. Clementine explained they'd been traveling west to find distant relatives after her husband's death back in Kansas, but upon reaching Sweetwater, they ran out of money. That was when she and her children were cornered by men who claimed her late husband owed them. She had no idea who Duke Slade was, or why these outlaws insisted on collecting some debt. Fear radiated from her as she recounted the harrowing chase through the alley. Everett glanced around, noticing curious eyes. "Let's get you out of the sun," he said. He led them to the general store porch out of earshot of prying onlookers. Once there, he purchased a little bread and jerky, offering them to Clementine and her children. She thanked him with quiet gratitude. "I can't repay you," she admitted, shame tugging at her features. "Don't worry about that now," Everett replied gently. "I won't see a family in need turned away. My ranch is a few miles south. It's not much, but it's got a roof and enough food to go around. You're welcome to shelter there until you figure out your next step." Clementine hesitated, pride warring with desperation, but she saw the hope shining in Thomas and Abigail's eyes. She finally nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Boone," she said, softly. That day marked the first step on a path that would change all their lives. They rode out of Sweetwater as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. A tension clung to the air, as if the desert itself braced for a storm yet to come. Later that evening, Clementine stood on the porch of Everett's modest ranch house. She watched her children devour the simple supper. Everett had prepared beans, cornbread, and salted pork. The rancher himself moved around the little kitchen with sure economical motions. He filled cups with well water, nodded politely whenever the children said thank you, and occasionally offered a tight smile of reassurance. He seemed used to solitude, but was doing his best to make them feel at ease. Inside the cramped sitting room, Clementine noticed an old newspaper clipping on a bookshelf. Curiosity stirred, and she carefully picked it up. The headline read, "Wyatt Earp cleans up Dodge City." A grin tugged at her lips. She recalled how famous the Earp brothers were for taming wild frontier towns. This snippet, no doubt, was a small piece of Everett's private interests. She returned it respectfully, sensing a quiet pride in his choice of reading. After dinner, as the children dozed on a makeshift bed of blankets near the fire, Everett offered Clementine the only bedroom in the small house. He took a rough cot in the corner for himself. Despite her insistence that she sleep on the floor with the children, Everett's gentlemanly resolve remained firm. She surrendered exhausted. The night was still, aside from distant coyote howls. Clementine found herself replaying the day's events in her mind. She thought about the men who had attacked them. Her late husband, Robert Carter, had never hinted at any debts, let alone dealings that would lead outlaws to track his widow hundreds of miles away. Had he been keeping secrets? Anxiety roiled in her stomach. As she stared at the ceiling in the dark, she also felt a cautious gratitude for Everett Boone. He'd risked violence in her defense without a second thought. That kind of valor was rare. Yet there was a sadness in his eyes, a guardedness that suggested burdens from his past. Unbeknownst to them both, the day's scuffle in Sweetwater had reached the ears of Duke Slade. He was not a man to let any interference slide. Over the next week, tension would mount, shadows would lengthen, and secrets would come to light. Particularly a secret about Clementine Carter's lineage that threatened to embroil them all in a whirlwind of greed and danger. The unraveling of that mystery would test Everett's loyalty, Clementine's strength, and the bonds they were beginning to forge. The days at Painted Rock Ranch passed in relative peace for a short while. Everett taught Abigail and Thomas simple chores. He showed them how to feed the chickens, check for eggs, and gather firewood. They trailed after him with wide-eyed curiosity, gradually recovering from the terror that had shadowed them. Clementine insisted on repaying Everett's kindness by preparing meals and cleaning, though he tried to wave away her efforts. Nevertheless, having tasks to fill her hours seemed to ease her worried mind. Yet the memory of the attack in Sweetwater lingered. Clementine found herself scanning the horizon for riders. Every time dust rose in the distance, her heart jolted, fearing Slade's men had come. Everett noticed, but assured her that Painted Rock was a tough place to sneak up on. He kept a rifle propped by the door and a revolver in his belt should trouble arise. Occasionally he'd ride into town for supplies or to speak with the sheriff, a grizzled fellow named Patrick Mulligan, who had a reputation for stepping aside when outnumbered. Mulligan recognized that tangling with Slade meant more trouble than Sweetwater's paltry forces could handle. While rummaging for leftover cloth to patch a tear in Thomas's shirt one morning, Clementine stumbled upon a small tin trunk in the ranch's storage shed. Curiosity piqued, she opened it to find old letters, a photograph of a younger Everett, with a woman who bore a striking resemblance to him, likely a sister or cousin, and a worn holster from the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Shock rolled through her. Everett had been a Pinkerton. The Pinkerton Agency was well known for employing skilled detectives who chased high-profile criminals across state lines. Why would a Pinkerton agent end up a solitary rancher? Clementine replaced the items, her mind spinning. She felt a pang of guilt at having invaded Everett's privacy, but reasoned she hadn't been snooping intentionally. Perhaps he had turned his back on that life, or perhaps tragedy had led him here. It explained his quick reflexes and calm under pressure. But she sensed more to the story than just a change in profession. She resolved not to pry, however, Everett Boone had already done so much for them. One scorching afternoon, Everett rode back from Sweetwater with urgent news. He found Clementine and the children in the barn feeding the chickens. He dismounted quickly, brow furrowed. "Clementine, we need to talk," he said, voice grave. She hurried over, noticing the tension in his eyes. He explained that while in town, he'd overheard a conversation at the Lonesome Spur. A couple of Slade's men were boasting about how soon they'd flush out that Carter woman and collect what's owed. They made references to someone named Victor Trelawney, a name Everett had never heard. The men were celebrating as though a grand plan was about to unfold, possibly involving a large sum of money. Unnerved Everett pressed them for details by posing as a curious onlooker, but they clammed up once they realized he was the same rancher who'd foiled their ambush. They left in a hurry, muttering that Slade was on his way to handle matters personally. Clementine's face paled. "I don't understand," she said shakily. "My husband never spoke of any debts. We weren't wealthy. We barely scraped by." "That might be what he wanted you to think," Everett said gently. "I'm not calling your husband dishonest, ma'am, but frontier secrets have a way of unraveling dangerously." Trembling Clementine told Everett all she knew. Her husband had once worked in Colorado's silver mines. Robert had mentioned a rich vein discovered by an old prospector years ago, a lost fortune rumored to be near the Arizona border. But Robert never claimed to have any stake in it. He simply liked repeating frontier legends. Could it be that Slade and his men believed Robert Carter had discovered the location of this lost treasure, and by extension believed Clementine might hold the key? Everett mulled this over. If Slade was convinced Clementine held knowledge of a hidden silver mine or a fortune, he might not stop until he'd wrung every last drop of information from her. But what if Clementine truly knew nothing? That wouldn't matter to outlaws blinded by greed. A heavy silence fell between them. At last Everett spoke. "You and the kids can't stay here if Slade's coming. This ranch is remote, and we'd have little backup. The sheriff doesn't seem prepared to stand against him." He paused, scanning the horizon. "But I'm not one to flee. If you want my protection, I'll give it. If you'd rather try to escape on a stagecoach or train, I'll help you get to Tucson." Clementine's face was pale, but resolute. "I won't keep running," she said softly, glancing at her children. "Abigail and Thomas have been frightened enough. I know we're safe with you, at least for now." "Then we prepare," Everett replied. "We'll stock up on ammunition and keep watch. I'll send a telegram to a friend of mine in Tombstone. Marshal Wyatt Earp once worked with the Pinkertons, and I have a contact who might help. If Slade wants a fight, he'll find one. But I'd like to avoid bloodshed if we can." Clementine nodded. Fear coiled in her stomach, but she found an ember of courage glowing beneath her terror. She refused to be helpless any longer. Perhaps in protecting them, Everett could also discover a piece of his own lost spirit. Together, they'd stand against whatever storm Slade unleashed. Night fell a cloak of navy blue darkness across the desert. On the ranch's front porch, Everett sat with his rifle across his lap, scanning the moonlit plain for signs of movement. Clementine inside lay awake. After the children had fallen asleep, she rose, wrapped herself in a shawl, and stepped outside quietly. She found Everett as still as a statue, eyes fixed on the horizon. Softly, she took a seat on the rocking chair beside him. "Thank you," she murmured, voice hushed. "For everything." Everett exhaled tension unraveling slightly in her presence. He shrugged. "No need for thanks, ma'am," he said. "I'm just doing what's right." The silence that followed was comfortable. The chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of the desert wind seemed to cradle them in an otherworldly hush. At length, Clementine confessed that she'd found the Pinkerton holster in the storage shed. A flicker of surprise crossed Everett's face, but he didn't accuse her of snooping. Instead, he lowered his gaze. "I used to hunt criminals," he admitted. "I was good at it. Too good. Somewhere along the way, I lost people I cared for. My sister was killed by a fugitive I'd been chasing. The guilt drove me to leave that life behind." Clementine placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered, heart aching for the pain etched into his words. "Your sister." He nodded, a faint tremor betraying his stoic demeanor. "We grew up in East Texas. Our folks died young. I raised her as best I could. She was sweet and bright. When she turned 15, I joined the Pinkertons for steady pay. But our fugitive sought revenge against me. He found her alone. I got there too late." He swallowed hard, voice thick. "I left the agency not long after. Came west to start over." Clementine's eyes brimmed with tears. She squeezed his arm lightly, offering solace. "You've saved me and my children," she said softly. "You're no longer too late." For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly he covered her hand with his. Under the sweeping canopy of stars they shared a fragile moment of closeness, born of sorrow and quiet empathy. Both had lost family. Both carried burdens. And in that stillness, a small current of warmth passed between them. A hope that perhaps the future might hold more than just fear and regret. Across the desert, in a sprawling encampment hidden among rocky outcrops, Duke Slade surveyed his domain. Tall and built like an iron statue, Slade had eyes of cold steel and a reputation for cruelty. Around him, dozens of hard-bitten outlaws lounged near campfires, cleaning their guns, drinking whiskey and swapping tales of robbery. Slade's second-in-command, a wiry man with a snake-like grin named Jasper Cole, approached spurs jingling. Boss Jasper said word is that Carter woman's holed up at Painted Rock Ranch with some big fella who broke Sam's nose in Sweetwater. Slade snorted. "So that rancher's playing hero, huh?" He rolled up a tattered map spread across a makeshift table. "We got word from Victor Trelawney that the widow's father was Silas Fontaine. You know that name?" Jasper shrugged. "He was a prospector and investor in them silver mines. Must have hit pay dirt." Slade chuckled darkly. According to Trelawney, Silas Fontaine found a mother lode bigger than any discovered in Colorado at the time. But old Silas died under mysterious circumstances. The location of that mine vanished. Some say it was stolen by Robert Carter. Slade nodded toward the flickering firelight. If Clementine Carter is Fontaine's only daughter, she might have the knowledge or the key to that fortune. We'll tear that ranch apart if we have to. I want that silver, and I want it soon. A hush settled in the camp. The men recognized that gleam in Slade's eyes, an unwavering greed that would drive him to unspeakable lengths. He'd raze Painted Rock Ranch to the ground if it meant claiming the rumored treasure. The desert night pressed in thick and foreboding as they plotted the next move in a high-stakes game that would soon erupt in violence. The following morning, Clementine awoke to find Everett saddling up Buckshot. He'd placed an old battered trunk onto the horse's flank, cinched tight with leather straps. Inside were supplies, some personal items, and a crucial piece of information he'd discovered among Clementine's husband's belongings. When I went to retrieve your things from the wagon that was left behind in Sweetwater, he explained I found this. He handed her a yellowed letter addressed to Robert Carter. Clementine's breath caught when she recognized her father's scrawled handwriting. Silas Fontaine had died before she turned 18, leaving her mother's side in Kansas to raise her alone. She had never been told of any hidden fortunes or mines, only that her father was a restless pioneer who died in an accident out west. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. It spoke vaguely of the vein and included a cryptic reference to the place where the painted rocks guard the gateway. It warned Robert to keep the location secret until he could secure a proper deed. Clementine's father had signed it, concluding with, "Give my love to Clementine." Tears pricked her eyes. "I had no idea," she whispered, voice shaking. "He left Kansas when I was just a child, always claiming he was searching for something big. I never heard from him again." She realized that her father's death might not have been an accident. It could have been murder by treasure-hungry criminals. The knowledge weighed heavily on her heart. Everett squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "Slade must have gotten wind that your father found a massive silver lode, and he thinks you or your late husband know its whereabouts. That letter might be the key. We have to keep it safe." Clementine nodded, steeling herself. "What do we do now? I need to ride to Tombstone." Everett explained. "I have an old contact there, Harvey Jacobs, who once worked under Wyatt Earp's direction. He's got connections with the marshals. If we can get legal protection or official backing, it might deter Slade. You and the children should stay here with old Ned, the ranch hand I've hired for the next few weeks. He's no Pinkerton, but he's loyal and a good shot. Board up the windows, stay armed, and keep a low profile." Clementine's heart hammered at the thought of Everett riding into potential danger alone, but she recognized that he was right. They needed allies, and she had no desire to see him confront Slade's entire gang without support. "Be careful," she implored, glancing at him with gratitude and concern. "We need you." He offered a small, lopsided grin. "Don't worry about me," he said, adjusting his hat. "I'll bring help. Meanwhile, keep that letter hidden. Lock it in my trunk if you must." With that, he mounted. Buckshot nodded a farewell and spurred his horse toward the horizon. Clementine watched him go, a flurry of emotions battling in her chest. Fear, hope, admiration, and a growing attachment she dared not name. Everett's journey to Tombstone took 2 days across rugged terrain. He camped under the open sky, keeping his rifle close. The vast emptiness reminded him of his drifting days, long rides, uncertain destinations haunted by regrets. But now he had a purpose, a cause that went beyond his own guilt. It stirred something like redemption within him. The memory of Clementine's soft words and the trust shining in her eyes spurred him onward. Tombstone was larger and rowdier than Sweetwater. Its streets bustled with prospectors, drifters, gamblers, and entrepreneurs. The clinking of spurs and the piano tunes from saloon doors reverberated through the dusty air. Everett stabled Buckshot at a local livery and headed straight for the marshal's office, a modest building near the center of town. He found Harvey Jacobs inside a stout man with graying hair and a handshake like a bear trap. They'd worked together briefly on a train robbery case when Everett was still a Pinkerton. Harvey greeted him with jovial warmth that faded quickly once Everett explained the situation. Mention of Duke Slade and a hidden fortune made Harvey's brow crease. "I've heard rumors about Slade sniffing around the territory," Harvey said grimly. "A piece of advice men like him aren't deterred by the law alone. He probably has half the local officials in his pocket. Even if we got a deputy or two out to your ranch, Slade's got enough guns to overrun it. And if your lady friend truly has a claim to a silver lode, that'll make him unstoppable if he gets his hands on it." Everett's jaw tightened. "We need more than a couple of badges, Harvey. We need a plan. If Clementine truly inherited that claim, we can try to file her stake legally, but we'll need hard proof. And we need to flush Slade out without letting him run roughshod over the ranch." Harvey stroked his stubble. "I'll see if I can round up a few trustworthy men. There's an old partner of Wyatt Earp's named Sherman Klein who might help. He's been itching to settle a score with Slade for some time now. But I can't promise you a small army. Tombstone's resource-strapped." "That's more than I have now," Everett replied. "Get who you can. We'll meet on the road halfway to Painted Rock in 2 days." Harvey nodded. "You sure about this, Everett? You want to stake your own life and property on protecting that family? I couldn't live with myself if I turned my back on them." Besides, Everett added softly the memory of Clementine's haunted eyes flickering in his mind. "I've got something worth fighting for now." Harvey clasped his hand. "All right, partner. Let's do it." Back at Painted Rock Ranch, unease grew with each passing hour. Clementine worked alongside Old Ned, a grizzled ranch hand with a limp but sharp instincts. They boarded windows, stacked hay bales as barricades, and kept a loaded shotgun near the door. Thomas and Abigail tried to help, but fear shimmered in their eyes. Clementine comforted them with stories of better days, recalling faint memories of a loving father who soared on dreams of striking silver. She withheld her own terror as best she could. One afternoon, Abigail darted into the house, breathless. Ma riders, 2 of them, coming up the hill. Clementine's blood turned to ice. She and Old Ned peered from a front window. 2 figures on horseback approached slowly. One waved a white handkerchief in mock diplomacy. They reined in near the porch. Clementine recognized them, Duke Slade's men from Sweetwater, the same who threatened her. The man with the scruffy beard spat on the ground. "Afternoon, ma'am," he called. "We heard your friend left you all alone. Didn't want you to feel lonely, so we decided to drop by." Old Ned cocked the shotgun. "If you've come to cause trouble, you'll get more than a warm welcome," he growled. The outlaw smirked. "We just want the widow to come out and have a little chat." His partner snickered, resting a hand on his revolver. Clementine forced herself to stand tall on the porch, shotgun in her hands. "There's nothing to discuss," she declared, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have no knowledge of any fortune." The men exchanged amused glances. "That so well, see. Mr. Slade ain't convinced. He figures you got something. Maybe a map, a letter, some clue from your dear old daddy. We've come to collect it. Now." Clementine steadied the shotgun. "Get off this property," she commanded, ignoring the tremor in her stomach. "Or the next warning you hear will be gunfire." The outlaw's eyes narrowed. After a tense moment, the scruffy one spat again, hitting the dirt near her boot. "Fine," he said softly. "But you tell that rancher friend of yours that when Duke Slade comes, he'll come with everything he's got. No piece of paper is worth your life or your kids, but the boss wants it. You decide how this ends." They turned and rode away, leaving swirling dust in their wake. Clementine slumped against the post, her heart hammering. Old Ned rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll hold, miss. I promise." Clementine nodded her resolve, hardening. If Slade was so bent on obtaining a map or letter, then her father must have truly uncovered something monumental. The question was whether that fortune would bring ruin or salvation. Meanwhile, Everett had gathered half a dozen men, including Harvey Jacobs and Sherman Klein, along a dusty stretch of road. Sherman, tall with a scar across his cheek, had personal reasons for wanting Slade behind bars. Slade killed Sherman's nephew over a gambling dispute years back. Their plan was to approach Painted Rock Ranch, fortify the position, and hopefully force a confrontation on their terms. They set out at dawn, riding hard across the desert. By noon the following day, Painted Rock's rugged silhouette appeared in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign that someone was alive and cooking. Everett's pulse quickened with relief. He prayed Clementine and the children were safe. As they drew closer, Old Ned appeared atop a rise, aiming a rifle until he recognized Everett's face. He let out a loud whoop. Soon Clementine rushed out, her children trailing behind. The waves of relief that washed over her face brought a knot of gratitude to Everett's chest. They quickly fell into strategizing. Sherman Klein scouted the perimeter, noting vantage points and approaches. Harvey and the other men set up a defensive ring of barricades. Everett went over the letter from Silas Fontaine, with Clementine searching for any final clues. "The place where the painted rocks guard the gateway," she read quietly. Then her eyes lit up. Painted Rock Ranch was named for the strange red and yellow rock formations in the canyon just north of here. My father must have known of this place. Did he name the ranch? Everett frowned. I assumed the property was always called Painted Rock, never questioned it. Could be a coincidence. But a part of him wondered if this ranch was indeed near the legendary mine site. If that was true, Slade's bandits might tear the land apart. They had to be ready. They posted lookouts and waited. Days stretched, hot and tense. Then just when the midday sun scorched overhead, a scout cried out. "Riders!" The group scrambled. In the distance, a dark line of horsemen advanced steadily toward the ranch. Dust plumed behind them like a storm cloud. At the head of the formation, looming in black attire, was Duke Slade himself. Slade halted his company just outside rifle range. From the porch, Everett, Harvey, Sherman, and Clementine peered through binoculars and scopes. "Looks like at least 20 men," Harvey muttered, dread creeping into his tone. "We're outnumbered 3-1. Sherman spat. "I've seen worse. We got the advantage of cover. They charge, they'll face a hail of bullets." Everett scanned the ranks. Slade sat astride a powerful stallion, a menacing grin on his face. Jasper Cole flanked him, expression twisted with an almost eager cruelty. They carried rifles, shotguns, and revolvers. Some even hefted torches, which made Everett's blood run cold. They might try to burn them out. Slade raised a hand, signaling a halt. He called out, voice booming across the dusty yard. "Listen up, folks. I'm here for one reason: the location of Silas Fontaine's silver. Hand over the letter or whatever trinket you have pointing to that mine, and you can walk away alive. Deny me, and I'll bury every last one of you in this dirt." Everett stepped forward, resolute. "There's no treasure here, Slade, and we won't be bullied." Slade laughed, a grating sound that set teeth on edge. "You think I'm blind to the extra guns you got there, rancher? How long you think you can hold out? I give you 5 minutes to decide before we commence with destruction." Everett's eyes flicked to Clementine, who hovered behind the barricade, Thomas and Abigail huddled near her. She bore a determined expression, gripping a rifle with white-knuckled hands. He turned back to Slade. "We're not surrendering," Everett called. "If you want to fight, you'll get one." A hush fell, broken only by the buzz of insects in the desert heat. Then Slade gave a short, sharp whistle. His men fanned out, brandishing weapons. "I was hoping you'd say that." Slade snarled. With a raised hand, he signaled the attack. Gunshots rang out, echoing off the distant rocks. Harvey and Sherman returned fire, picking off some of Slade's men who ventured too close. Bullets whined, kicking up dust around the ranch. Clementine shielded her children behind a sturdy crate. Old Ned crouched at a window, firing steadily. A couple of Slade's men tumbled from their horses, writhing or lying still in the dirt. Yet more circled around, seeking a blind spot. Flaring torches arced through the air, landing on the thatched roof of the barn. Dry straw caught quickly. Flames roared, sending black smoke billowing. The horses inside whinnied in terror, cursing. Everett dashed from cover, ignoring the hail of gunfire. He flung open the barn doors, slapping the horses to drive them out. He managed to save a few, but the inferno was spreading fast. Above the roaring flames, Slade's laughter echoed. Despite their smaller numbers, the defenders put up a fierce resistance. Harvey nailed 3 outlaws in quick succession. Sherman's rifle barked, forcing Slade's men to take cover behind the corral. Everett, singed by the barn's flames, ducked behind a water trough to reload. Fear for Clementine gnawed at him, but she was holding steady. She'd fired at least one shot that dropped a bandit trying to circle the house. Hours seemed to pass in mere minutes, chaos swirling. Then Slade himself spurred his horse forward, a dark juggernaut barreling toward the ranch. Jasper Cole and a half-dozen others followed, rifles blazing. Bullets pummeled the wooden barricade's splintering timber. One of Harvey's men yelped and went down, clutching his side. The children shrieked, terror echoing in the smoky air. Everett roared, stepping out to intercept Slade. He fired his shotgun, striking one of Slade's flanks, who toppled from the saddle. Slade fired back, grazing Everett's shoulder. Pain seared through him, but adrenaline forced him onward. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the iron fire poker leaning near the porch. The midday sun glinted off Slade's revolver as he leveled it at Everett. Suddenly, a rifle cracked from the side. Slade jerked his hat, flying off. Clementine stood there, her eyes blazing, having just fired. She missed Slade by mere inches, but she'd saved Everett from a killing shot. Slade snarled and wheeled his horse away, blood trickling down his temple from the graze. Fury lit Slade's features. "Burn the house," he ordered his men. Jasper Cole lobbed another torch. It struck the side of the ranch house, setting the porch ablaze. Smoke choked the defenders. The ranch teetered on the brink of collapse. Amid the pandemonium, Clementine realized she needed to protect the children from the encroaching flames. She motioned for them to crawl out the back window, old Ned guiding them. Sherman and Harvey laid down, suppressing fire, forcing Slade's men to duck. The children scrambled free, tears streaming down sooty cheeks. Clementine grabbed the letter from Silas Fontaine, shoving it into her pocket, determined to keep it safe. Suddenly, a figure vaulted over the half-collapsed fence, Jasper Cole brandishing a knife. He lunged at Clementine, eyes gleaming with malice. She shrank back, fumbling with her rifle. Cole batted it away and seized her wrist, twisting it viciously. She cried out in pain, dropping to her knees. He pinned her against the flaming porch, the heat singeing her hair. "You'll give me that letter," he hissed, pressing the knife to her throat. "Or I'll slit you open sweet as a hog." Her mind reeled. Thomas and Abigail screamed from the other side of the yard. Then, out of nowhere, Everett's voice roared. "Clementine!" She spotted him charging through the smoke-wounded shoulder. Be damned. He tackled Cole, sending them both tumbling across the porch. The outlaw thrashed and kicked, but Everett's raw fury fueled him. He landed a punishing blow to Cole's jaw, dislodging the knife. Blood spattered. Clementine crawled backward, heart hammering. However, in the midst of the struggle, Cole managed to draw a hidden derringer. He pointed it at Everett's chest. Time slowed. Clementine screamed. No, she grabbed a fallen pistol from the porch. Trembling, she fired. The bullet struck Cole in the side, knocking him off Everett. Cole's eyes widened, shock etched across his twisted face. He collapsed in a heap, breath gurgling. Seconds later, he was still. For a moment, all Clementine heard was her pounding heart. Then Everett was beside her, helping her to her feet. Ash rained down from the burning porch. She stared at the smoking gun in her hand, trembling with the realization that she'd taken a life to save Everett's. "Clementine," he whispered, pulling her into a brief embrace, the heat of the fire lapping at their backs. He could feel her trembling, but also sensed her resolve beneath the horror. Their moment of respite ended abruptly when a shout rang out behind them. Slade dismounted, advanced with a group of his men brandishing guns. They were cornered. Sherman Klein popped up from behind a smoldering wagon, hurling a stick of dynamite he'd procured from the ranch shed. Everett had kept some for blasting stubborn rocks. The explosive landed near Slade's group. They scattered in alarm. The blast shook the ground, sending dust and debris skyward. Several outlaws were thrown from their feet. In the chaos, Slade retreated behind a rock formation, cursing. Sherman's face glistened with sweat and soot, but he let out a triumphant whoop, reloading quickly. Fire consumed the barn and licked at the house. Painted Rock Ranch was being destroyed. Yet the defenders fought with desperation, refusing to relent. More of Slade's men lay wounded or dead in the dirt, while the rest scrambled for cover or retreated out of range. Even so, Slade's presence still loomed, orchestrating the attack. Clementine, breathing heavily, glanced at Everett. "We have to finish this," she said, tears streaking her sooty cheeks. She pulled out her father's letter. "He mentions a spot near Painted Rock Canyon. Maybe we can lure Slade away from the ranch. This is what he wants." Everett caught on. "You want to draw him to the canyon force, a showdown where we have the advantage of the natural rock walls." She nodded. "We can't let him keep terrorizing us. If we can just lead him into a narrow pass, we might corner him." Harvey overheard. "That's risky. He has more men." Sherman spat, wiping sweat from his brow. "I say let's do it. We can rig more dynamite in that canyon if we have to. Better than letting him pick us off here and burn the ranch down around us." Everett quickly formed the plan. He, Sherman Harvey, and the remaining defenders would mount up, pretending to flee with Clementine. They'd let Slade spot them heading into Painted Rock Canyon. Meanwhile, Old Ned would take the children to safety behind the eastern ridge. If everything worked, they'd trap Slade in the canyon's narrow throat. If it failed, they'd be out in the open, pinned down. But Painted Rock Ranch was already in flames. There was precious little left to defend. With hearts pounding, they gathered horses. Clementine rode with Everett, clinging tight. Sherman and Harvey escorted them. As soon as they left the cover of the yard, Slade's men fired a volley, but the group galloped away. A triumphant grin twisted Slade's mouth. "They're running for the canyon," he barked. After them, his men spurred their horses' adrenaline, fueled by the scent of victory. Painted Rock Canyon loomed, carved by centuries of wind and water. Towering red and yellow stone pillars flanked a winding path. Everett, leading the group, slowed. Sherman and Harvey hurried to set small charges of dynamite near boulders perched precariously above the canyon walls. They fumbled with the short fuses, positioning them carefully. Slade's posse thundered closer, the clamor of hooves echoing off stone. Halfway through the canyon, the defenders dismounted, taking positions behind outcroppings. Clementine crouched near Everett, her father's letter clutched in hand. Sweat dripped down her temple. This was the place Silas Fontaine had written about, a hidden gateway in the Painted Rocks. Could the legendary silver lode be somewhere in these cliffs? A pang of realization hit her if her father had truly discovered it. Perhaps it lay just beyond the next bend. But now that promise of fortune took second place to survival. Slade's men entered the canyon, weapons raised, scanning the rock walls. The moment they were in position, Sherman lit the fuses. "Fire in the hole," he yelled. The charges exploded, dislodging massive boulders that tumbled down, blocking the exit behind Slade's group. Dust and debris filled the air. The outlaws were trapped. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the canyon walls in thunderous booms. Slade's men, disoriented, scrambled for cover. Everett's group fired from multiple vantage points. Harvey took a grazing shot to the arm, but managed to pick off 2 of the outlaws. Sherman reloaded, cursing as bullets chipped the stone near his head. Clementine steadied her rifle, fired at a bandit creeping along the canyon floor. She missed, but the shot forced him to dive away, losing his aim. Slade bellowed orders, furious. He managed to rally a few men returning fire in relentless bursts. A bullet ricocheted, cutting a streak across Everett's cheek. He winced, but held firm. Another shot caught Sherman's leg. He collapsed with a grunt, but continued firing from the ground. The canyon reverberated with violence, heat, and the tang of gunpowder. Finally, with most of his men dead or scattered, Slade was cornered behind a slab of rock. He had a revolver and a half-spent rifle. Jasper Cole was gone. The unstoppable force of Slade's gang had been broken. Sensing an opportunity, Everett climbed down carefully. "Cover me!" he shouted. He approached Slade's position, heart pounding. Clementine followed, refusing to remain on the sidelines. Slade's eyes shone with hatred as Everett emerged. He leveled his revolver, but Clementine fired, knocking the weapon from Slade's grip. Furious, Slade bellowed and swung the butt of his rifle at Everett's wounded shoulder. Pain exploded as Everett stumbled back. Slade tried to run, but Clementine blocked his path, aiming her rifle. Eyes blazing with defiance, she ordered him to stop. Breathing raggedly, Slade slowly raised his hands. dust caked his sweat-drenched face, and a shallow cut bled across his brow. Without his men and guns, he was just a man cornered by fate. When the dust finally settled, Harvey and the others subdued the surviving outlaws, disarmed them, and bound their hands. Sherman limped, leaning on a rifle, but he was alive. The defenders were battered and bruised, yet triumphant. The roar of gunfire ebbed into a haunting silence as they processed what they'd achieved. They had bested Duke Slade. Everett approached Slade. "You killed good men today," he said, grimly. "You threatened a woman and her children. You'll face justice for that." Slade spat malice, sparking in his glare. "Justice this territory belongs to men like me, Boone. You can kill me, but others will come for that silver." Everett set his jaw, refusing to rise to the provocation. He handed Slade over to Harvey, who planned to deliver the outlaw to the nearest marshal's office. For once, the law would have a chance to hold Slade accountable. Then Clementine felt a pull deep within her. She turned toward the canyon's far end, where the path narrowed further. A faint shimmering caught her eye. She recalled the words, the place where the painted rocks guard the gateway. With her father's letter in hand, she walked carefully forward. Everett, wounded and exhausted, but curious, followed at her side. The others stayed behind to guard Slade and the captured outlaws. They rounded a bend, stepping through a gap in the canyon walls. There, hidden in the shadows, a narrow crevice led to a cavern. Faint streams of sunlight filtered through cracks in the rock overhead, illuminating veins of dull silver ore in the walls. Clementine gasped. "My father." "He was right," she whispered. A sense of awe and sorrow washed over her. Silas Fontaine's dream had come to life, a trove of silver, perhaps worth a fortune, beyond imagination. Yet Clementine felt no surge of greed. All she could think of was the blood spilled for this secret the father she barely knew, who gave everything to find it. She turned to Everett, tears glistening in her eyes. "So many died chasing this," she said, voice trembling. "My father, Robert. People used me as a pawn. I don't want it if it means more bloodshed." Everett gently took her hand. "No one can force you to claim it," he said softly. "You can file the deed under the law, then decide how to use it. Maybe help build a school or a hospital in the territory. Something good can come out of it." He hesitated, searching her face. "But it's your choice, Clementine." She inhaled, chest tight with emotion. Then she nodded. "We'll do it together," she said, a small but resolute smile forming. "We'll make sure it does more good than harm." He returned her smile, relieved. Together they turned away from the cavern, stepping back into the sunlit canyon where their allies waited. Outside, the smoke from Painted Rock Ranch still curled into the sky. But beneath that sky they had forged a new bond, a promise to guard each other and a lost fortune that need not remain lost nor cursed, but could serve as a foundation for a better future. The weeks that followed were a swirl of rebuilding and mending. Duke Slade, shackled and under guard, was taken to Tucson to stand trial. His gang decimated and leaderless, scattered like tumbleweeds in the wind. Harvey Jacobs returned to Tombstone, vowing to testify against Slade if needed. Sherman, his leg healing, slowly stayed on to help Everett salvage what remained of Painted Rock Ranch. Old Ned promised to stay for as long as the ranch needed him, touched by the loyalty that had grown through battle. Clementine, meanwhile, wrestled with the complexities of her father's legacy. Filing the claim on the silver lode required navigating tricky legal waters, but with Everett by her side, she found the strength to face them. They traveled briefly to a territorial land office, presenting her father's letter as evidence. The clerks, initially skeptical, were swayed by the letter's authenticity and Clementine's resolute determination. A process was set in motion to officially register the Fontaine claim. If silver truly flowed in that hidden cavern, Clementine would become one of the wealthiest landowners in Arizona. But she was determined to ensure those riches wouldn't be tainted by further violence. During quiet nights, Clementine and Everett spoke of the future. She admitted she wanted to remain on Painted Rock Ranch to restore it and build something lasting in memory of her father's dream, and in memory of the life Robert Carter had always longed to give her. For Everett, the ranch had been a refuge from the ghosts of his Pinkerton past. Now it felt like a place he could share with someone he cared about deeply, a fresh start they both deserved. Thomas and Abigail slowly healed their laughter, returning as they helped Everett and Clementine around the ranch, feeding livestock, replanting the garden, learning to ride ponies. Though nightmares still stirred them each day, brought new strength. One evening after working on the burned-out ranch house, Everett stood beside Clementine on the porch. In the soft lantern light, he removed his hat, voice low. "You didn't just need saving. You reminded me what it means to fight for something good again." Clementine stepped closer, her eyes shining. "Whatever comes, I want to face it with you." Their hands found each other, and beneath the stars they shared a quiet, hopeful kiss. Painted Rock Ranch rose from its ashes. With funds from the Fontaine claim, Clementine restored the schoolhouse, supported families hurt by Slade's gang, and opened a clinic in her father's memory. Everett trained ranch hands in defense, ensuring they were never unprepared again. When Duke Slade was finally tried in Tucson, Clementine and Everett testified. Justice prevailed. Slade was sentenced to life in Yuma prison. As peace settled over the land, Clementine often sat with Everett on the porch, watching the moon rise over the painted rocks. "My father's dream brought pain," she whispered, "but look at what grew from it." Everett held her close. The fire burned away the past. What's left is what we choose to build. And what they built was more than a ranch. It was a home founded on healing, justice, and love. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us on this gritty, heartfelt journey into the wild frontier, where one rancher's unwavering courage saved a widow and her children from ruthless bandits, and together they unearthed a fortune lost to time. Yet the real treasure shone, not in silver veins, but in the bonds forged under gunfire, and the hope reborn from the ashes of Painted Rock Ranch. If this tale of danger, sacrifice, and redemption kept you on the edge of your seat, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who love an epic Western drama, and subscribe to this channel to hear more captivating stories of the human spirit triumphing against all odds. Your engagement helps us bring you even more adventures, and we can't wait to saddle up and ride again with you soon. Until next time, happy trails.